Do you remember those Christmas mornings when the toys under the tree felt like pure magic only true Americans remember? In the 1970s, those dolls, games, and gadgets turned simple living rooms into wonderlands of noise, laughter, and wide-eyed joy. When did that kind of Christmas magic quietly fade away? When the Star Wars action figures hit store shelves in 1977, no one could have imagined how much they would change childhood and toy history forever. Kids who had just seen Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Darth Vader on the big screen could suddenly hold the galaxy in their hands. These figures were not just toys, they were an invitation to relive the adventure, to build a personal version of the universe where the battle between good and evil never had to end. Parents hunted them down, stores sold out faster than you could say "the Force," and children improvised entire worlds with cardboard boxes as spaceships. The details were simple, but the imagination they sparked was limitless. For many, these were more than plastic figures. They were companions through endless afternoons of make-believe. The figures did what no movie sequel could ever do. They let you keep the story going. And when those tiny lightsabers snapped into hands barely the size of a pencil eraser, a generation discovered that wonder could fit in the palm of a child's hand. The Star Wars action figures did not just launch a franchise, they launched a culture of play that still defines American nostalgia today. Stretch Armstrong looked like your average muscle-bound hero, but every kid who got one for Christmas quickly found out he was anything but ordinary. Filled with a mysterious gel-like substance, this toy could stretch to unbelievable lengths. Arms pulled across the room, legs twisted around table legs, even tied into knots. It was the perfect blend of curiosity and chaos, the kind of fun that made parents nervous and kids delighted. You could spend hours testing his limits, laughing when he snapped back into shape as if nothing had happened. He was indestructible. Or at least he seemed that way until you went too far and that strange goo started leaking out. Still, Stretch was unlike anything before him. In a world filled with action figures that stood stiffly in place, he invited movement, creativity, and a little mischief. The simple act of stretching him across the room became a test of childhood strength and imagination. He was the friend who could take a beating and still smile back at you. Stretch Armstrong was more than a toy. He was a symbol of durability, resilience, and the untamed energy of the 1970s kid. The Evel Knievel stunt cycle was not just a toy, it was a ticket to the wildest dreams of a generation obsessed with danger, speed, and spectacle. Every kid who wound up that crank felt the thrill of the jump before it even happened. When that motorcycle took off the ramp and soared across the living room floor, you could almost hear the crowd cheering. It was chaos and glory rolled into one perfect moment. Kids built their own ramps from books, boxes, and furniture, launching evil into walls, ceiling fans, and sometimes even the Christmas tree. No one cared if he crashed. That was part of the fun. Evel Knievel was America's daredevil hero, and this toy captured that spirit perfectly. It made risk feel exciting and courage feel possible. For children of the 1970s, this was not just a toy. It was a lesson in defying limits. The Evel Knievel stunt cycle turned scraped knees into badges of honor and imagination into adrenaline, and every time it hit the floor and kept going, you felt like you could too. The big wheel was more than a tricycle. It was freedom molded in bright plastic. Low to the ground and fast on the pavement, it gave kids their first taste of independence, their own ride built for adventure. For many, it was the first time they could race without training wheels, feeling the wind rush past their face with nothing but plastic wheels between them and the world. That first skid around the corner or slide down the driveway was pure electricity, childhood's version of flight. You could hear that plastic wheel scraping the sidewalk from blocks away, the sound of pure childhood joy echoing through suburban streets. It was the kind of toy that brought the neighborhood together, a parade of kids racing down driveways with hair flying and laughter trailing behind them. Parents loved it because it was safe, but kids loved it because it felt dangerous. You were inches from the ground, turning sharp corners, skidding, spinning out, all in your own backyard. It was your first taste of rebellion wrapped in sunshine and molded plastic. Whether you were cruising alone or lining up for impromptu races, the big wheel made everyone feel like a champion. It was more than just a ride, it was a rite of passage. Every scratch on its surface told a story, and every kid who had one remembers that thrill of taking off, pedaling hard, and never once looking back. The Simon electronic memory game looked like something from the future when it first appeared. Circular, glowing, and armed with hypnotic tones, it was part challenge, part trance. You would press those colored pads, red, blue, green, yellow, each beat pulling you deeper into the rhythm of concentration and excitement. The tension would build with every new sequence, fingers hovering over the lights as the room fell silent, except for those iconic tones. And when you finally beat your high score, that surge of pride felt like conquering a machine straight out of science fiction. It was a battle between memory and nerves, between calm focus and the inevitable moment you pressed the wrong light. The sound of failure, a harsh buzz, was unforgettable, but so was the pride of getting it right. In a world before smartphones, Simon was the first real taste of interactive technology that felt alive. Families gathered around, cheering each other on, competing to see who could go one step further. The flashing lights and catchy sounds filled the room with energy that was both competitive and communal. It taught patience, focus, and the thrill of victory one sequence at a time. Even today, those tones echo in memory, a perfect reminder of when high-tech meant 4 colored buttons and a handful of hope. Before tablets and touchscreens, there was Lite-Brite, a glowing window into imagination. The moment the lights turned off and those colored pegs clicked into place, magic happened. You were not just drawing, you were illuminating your own little world. It was more than an art project. It was an experience of wonder, that quiet hum of creativity glowing in a darkened room. Each design felt personal, a secret piece of light that belonged only to you. Kids would spend hours creating glowing rockets, flowers, and holiday scenes, each design brighter and more personal than the last. The gentle hum of the light bulb inside became the soundtrack to quiet concentration. Parents loved it because it was creative, but kids loved it because it felt endless. No 2 nights with Lite-Brite ever looked the same. The smell of warm plastic and the glow of rainbow dots on the wall became part of growing up in the 1970s. It was art that shined, literally. It made you feel like you were creating something that mattered, something worth turning off the lights for. The satisfaction of pulling out each peg and starting again was pure, innocent joy. In a time when technology was still a novelty, Lite-Brite made electricity feel like magic, and creativity feel limitless. By the early 1970s, G.I. Joe had grown a beard, traded his army fatigues for adventure gear, and become the G.I. Joe Adventure Team. He was no longer just a soldier. He was an explorer, scientist, and hero of the natural world. Kids could send him on missions to jungles, deserts, and oceans, all without leaving the carpet. The new line of vehicles, scuba suits, and gear sets turned bedrooms into secret bases. Every accessory had purpose: tiny ropes, plastic binoculars, and a working winch that made kids feel like they were part of an expedition. The toys' realism gave power to their imagination, making every play session feel like a discovery. The Adventure Team slogan, "The Adventure Team is ready for action," was not just marketing. It was a rallying cry for imagination. Parents appreciated its wholesome shift away from war, while kids loved the sense of freedom it offered. You could make up your own stories, and the only rule was that G.I. Joe always saved the day. The fuzzy hair, kung fu grip, and detailed accessories made him feel almost alive. He was a reflection of a changing America, curious, courageous, and always moving forward. The G.I. Joe Adventure Team showed that adventure did not need battlefields. Sometimes the biggest missions started right at home. For every kid who ever dreamed of speed, Hot Wheels track sets were pure heaven. Those bright orange strips of plastic stretched across living rooms and hallways, looping, curving, and soaring off makeshift ramps. The sound of a tiny die-cast car hitting the track was enough to make your heart race. There was an art to it, getting the loops just right, testing gravity's limits with every twist and jump, and when two cars raced side by side, it felt like a miniature world championship unfolding right there on your carpet. You could build your own course, challenge your friends, and spend hours fine-tuning every jump. It was creativity in motion, engineering for kids who just wanted to go fast. Parents might have tripped over tracks and cars, but to children, that clutter was a sign of greatness. Every crash was followed by a rebuild. Every failed loop was a lesson in persistence. The best part? The thrill never got old. Hot Wheels turned ordinary afternoons into Grand Prix events and household floors into racetracks of imagination. It was not just about the cars. It was about control, curiosity, and the simple joy of movement. And when that perfect run finally happened, one clean loop, one perfect landing, it felt like victory itself. The Easy Bake Oven turned playtime into culinary confidence, one light bulb cake at a time. It was the perfect mix of fun, independence, and sugar. Every little chef who slid that tiny pan into the glowing oven felt like they were creating something truly special. The smell of warm chocolate or vanilla drifting from that small machine filled the house with excitement. Parents might have laughed, but for kids, it was serious business. You measured, mixed, and waited, because good things, even tiny ones, took time. The best part was sharing the results, however uneven or overbaked they might have been. The Easy Bake Oven was more than a toy. It was a gateway to creativity, teaching patience, pride, and the joy of giving. Under the Christmas tree, it represented possibility, a promise that even the smallest hands could make something magical. And for many kids, it was the first taste of independence, a moment where they were not just playing pretend, they were baking for real. Weebles might have looked simple, round little figures that wobble but don't fall down. But they had a magic all their own. In an era of sharp-edged toys and delicate gadgets, Weebles were indestructible. They rolled, rocked, and spun endlessly, bouncing back from every push and tumble. They were perfect for toddlers, but even older kids found them fascinating. Each colorful character had a cheerful face that seemed to smile no matter how many times it was knocked over. Parents loved them because they were safe, and kids loved them because they were unstoppable. There was something strangely satisfying about that bounce back, a lesson in persistence disguised as play. Weebles came in houses, cars, and playground sets, creating entire miniature worlds where fun never ended. You could knock them down again and again, and they would always return upright, like a toy version of optimism itself. Decades later, that jingle still echoes in memory. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Simple, joyful, and endlessly durable, they were the perfect reflection of what childhood was meant to be: resilient, cheerful, and full of laughter. Barbie's country camper was the dream machine every child wanted parked under the Christmas tree in the 1970s. It was more than a toy. It was freedom on four wheels, perfectly sized for Barbie's next big adventure. Painted in bright, cheerful orange with sunny flower decals, it captured the spirit of a decade obsessed with travel, independence, and style. Kids could imagine Barbie hitting the open road, setting up camp by a cardboard lake, or hosting a groovy cookout with her friends under a paper sun. The camper had it all: fold-out chairs, tiny sleeping bags, and even a pretend kitchenette. It was the perfect symbol of the era's optimism: bold, colorful, and ready for the unknown. For little girls across America, it was a glimpse into a grown-up world of freedom and self-expression, where you could go anywhere and be anything. Barbie wasn't waiting for Prince Charming. She was driving herself across the country, and everyone was invited. The country camper made imagination feel like a lifestyle, and it turned backyards into national parks. Every time the camper doors swung open, it whispered the same promise to its young owner: adventure is just around the bend. The Bionic Man action figure took television magic and put it directly in the hands of kids everywhere. Based on the $6 Million Man, the toy had a bionic eye you could peer through, and limbs that worked like supermachinery. With every click, twist, and heroic pose, children felt like they had the strength to lift cars or leap over fences. His red tracksuit became iconic, the symbol of power and science combined. This was more than a doll. It was an action statement. The toy tapped into the fascination of a new technological era, when computers, robotics, and space travel were becoming everyday conversation. Kids did not just play with Steve Austin. They became him. They staged daring rescues, defeated invisible villains, and imagined secret government missions right in the living room. The Bionic Man gave kids a sense of control, a kind of power that felt both thrilling and noble. It showed them that heroes could be rebuilt, that even after being broken, you could come back stronger. For a generation raised on optimism and Saturday morning reruns, this toy proved that science and imagination could make anyone unstoppable. Rock'em Sock'em Robots was the sound of the 1970s living room in full swing. Plastic fists clashing, gears grinding, and laughter echoing off the walls. It was a toy that made competition fun, not fierce. Two fighters, one red, one blue, stood face to face in their tiny boxing ring, each waiting for the moment to land that perfect uppercut. When you finally did, the other robot's head popped up with a satisfying snap that never got old. It was fast, noisy, and completely addicting. Siblings and friends could settle arguments the old-fashioned way, through pure button-pounding skill. What made it so special was how simple it was. No batteries, no screens, no rules, just two players, two robots, and one unforgettable sound of victory. It was the perfect mix of sportsmanship and silliness, teaching kids that sometimes the best part of a fight was just laughing about it afterward. In an era of high-tech promises, Rock'em Sock'em Robots reminded everyone that fun didn't need to be complicated. It just needed a little noise, a little movement, and a lot of heart. Tonka steel trucks were the heavyweights of the toy world, built tough enough to survive almost anything a child could dream up. These were not fragile plastic playthings. They were solid, weighty, and proudly advertised as being built like real ones. And they meant it. You could dig them into dirt piles, load them with rocks, roll them through mud, or leave them out in the snow. Tonkas never quit. For kids in the 1970s, they were more than construction toys. They were tools of imagination. A backyard could become a construction site, a quarry, or a frontier road, all powered by tiny hands and big dreams. Every scratch in the yellow paint told a story of hard play and honest adventure. Parents loved them because they lasted forever, and kids loved them because they felt real. Tonka trucks taught a generation what durability meant, not just in toys, but in spirit. They were built to work, built to play, and built to last. Even now, decades later, the sight of a well-worn Tonka truck still carries the weight of childhood's proudest memories. Before superhero movies ruled the world, the Mego superhero figures were the ones who brought comic book legends to life. Batman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, and Superman, all wearing tiny cloth costumes that looked straight out of the panels kids adored. Mego did something remarkable. They made heroes feel human. These figures could bend, pose, and fly off furniture ledges into daring rescues. The detail was charming, from Batman's fabric cape to Spider-Man's bright red websuit. Each one came with just enough realism to make pretend play feel epic. You could stage your own Justice League meetings or face-offs between good and evil right on the living room floor. The 1970s were a time when kids' imaginations were as big as the universe, and Mego gave them the cast to fill it. Before CGI and movie universes, there were cardboard cities, pillow fort skyscrapers, and these heroes standing tall among them. For countless fans, those 8-inch action figures were their first connection to a lifelong love of comics. And every time a cape fluttered through the air, you could almost hear the promise of justice in plastic form. Baby Alive was the doll that redefined what realistic play meant in the 1970s. She didn't just sit prettily on a shelf. She ate, drank, and yes, needed her diaper changed. For young children, that was revolutionary. Baby Alive gave kids their first taste of responsibility, teaching them how to care, nurture, and empathize, all while being wrapped in fun. Feeding her from that tiny spoon, watching her drink from the bottle, and then realizing what came next. It was all part of the charm. The doll was designed to mimic real life, and that made it irresistible. Kids loved the interactive nature of it, the sense that they were part of something grown-up and important. Parents found it both amusing and educational, a toy that blended playtime with lessons in care. Baby Alive became more than a doll. It was a friend, a student, and sometimes a test of patience. It reflected the era's growing fascination with realism in play and the idea that toys could teach as much as they entertained. And for every kid who proudly carried their Baby Alive around, it felt like love, laughter, and a tiny touch of real life rolled into one. Shrinky Dinks brought a kind of kitchen table magic no one saw coming. All you needed were some plastic sheets, colored pencils, and an oven. Draw your design, maybe a superhero, a rainbow, or your pet, cut it out, and watch in wonder as it shrank down to a thick miniature masterpiece. It felt like alchemy, watching your creation curl and harden right before your eyes. Shrinky Dinks were creativity you could literally hold. Kids would turn their art into jewelry, keychains, or fridge magnets, proudly showing off their colorful little charms. It was arts and crafts, science experiment, and self-expression all rolled into one. Parents loved it because it was quiet and harmless. Kids loved it because it was magic they could make themselves. In a time before tablets and apps, Shrinky Dinks gave you full creative control with nothing more than imagination and a hot oven. The process never got old. The excitement of peeking through that oven window was pure childhood wonder. It was proof that creativity, when baked with curiosity, always came out looking a little brighter. The Spirograph drawing set turned simple pens and gears into an art show of hypnotic precision. You would sit with paper, a handful of plastic rings, and colored pens, then watch as swirling loops and spirals formed in front of you. It felt like creating perfect chaos, patterns that looked too beautiful to be random but too intricate to plan. Every circle, curve, and line became a new discovery. For kids who loved art but wanted something beyond crayons, Spirograph felt like science and creativity holding hands. It taught patience, coordination, and focus in a way that never felt like a lesson. Parents loved watching the quiet concentration it inspired, while kids felt proud of every page they filled. The rhythmic motion of the gears was oddly soothing, almost meditative. Each finished design was like capturing motion itself, frozen on paper in color and symmetry. In a noisy world, Spirograph gave kids a calm space to create something mesmerizing. Even decades later, those delicate patterns remind us of a simpler time when wonder could come from nothing more than pen, paper, and the hum of imagination. Before virtual reality and video games, there was the ViewMaster 3D viewer, a small red device that turned the world into something extraordinary. You clicked through reels of colorful images, each one bursting into perfect 3D right before your eyes. National landmarks, beloved cartoons, space adventures, even fairy tales, all came to life in miniature slides that transported kids to places they had only dreamed of. There was something deeply satisfying about the tactile click, the soft mechanical rhythm that made each new image feel like a secret reveal. The ViewMaster was both educational and enchanting, a toy that made travel and learning feel like play. It was portable magic, no batteries, no wires, just light and imagination. For many kids, it was their first window to the world beyond their hometowns. You could hold it up to the light and suddenly be standing at the Grand Canyon or walking through Disneyland. The ViewMaster didn't just show pictures, it showed possibility. And with each click of the reel, it reminded kids that there was always more to see. Silly Putty might have been the simplest toy ever invented, but it captured the essence of fun better than most. Soft, stretchy, and wonderfully weird, it could bounce like a ball, stretch like gum, or lift newspaper comic prints right off the page. It was science and silliness in one red plastic egg. You could roll it, squeeze it, or twist it into strange shapes. It never lost its charm. There was no right or wrong way to play with Silly Putty, and maybe that was the secret to its success. It encouraged curiosity and creativity, letting kids explore texture, movement, and physics without even realizing it. The squish and pop between your fingers was oddly satisfying, the kind of tactile joy that screens could never replicate. Parents loved it because it was clean. Kids loved it because it was endless. Silly Putty was proof that imagination did not need rules. It just needed something squishy and a pair of willing hands. Decades later, that pink goo still sits on store shelves, ready to stretch its way into new memories. When the Pong home console arrived under Christmas trees in 1975, families were stepping into a new world of play. It was not flashy, just two white paddles, a tiny square ball, and a beeping sound that echoed through the living room, but it felt revolutionary. For the first time, television screens became more than something to watch. They became something to do. Families gathered around the set, twisting knobs and cheering each time the ball bounced off the edge of the screen. It was simple, but that simplicity was its magic. Parents could play it, kids could master it, and suddenly the idea of gaming became a shared family experience. The glow of the TV light at night, the hum of static, and the sound of laughter mixed with that unmistakable ping. It all felt like the future had arrived. Pong was the beginning of everything that would follow. Arcade culture, home consoles, and the digital playgrounds that now fill our lives. Back then, it was not about graphics or scores. It was about connection. It brought families closer in a new way, uniting generations over competition that was fun, innocent, and endlessly repeatable. It turned living rooms into arenas and made every household feel like it owned a piece of tomorrow. Looking back, Pong wasn't just the first home video game. It was the moment when imagination met technology, and playtime would never be the same again. The Magic 8 Ball was small, mysterious, and irresistible, the perfect mix of curiosity and suspense that no child or teenager could resist shaking. That glossy black sphere with its floating blue window somehow seemed to hold the answers to life's most important questions. Will I be famous? Does my crush like me? Should I eat the last piece of pie? With every shake, the future felt just within reach. Watching that white triangle drift into view with answers like yes, definitely, or ask again later was a thrill that never faded. It was part toy, part oracle, and part party trick, all rolled into one. What made it so special was not the accuracy of its answers, but the moment it created. The laughter, the teasing, the excited hush as everyone leaned in to see what fate had to say. The Magic 8 Ball turned ordinary afternoons into moments of wonder and decision-making that somehow felt real. You could never quite explain why it felt magical, but it did. It was like holding a secret in your hands, one that spoke back just enough to keep you guessing. Even adults could not resist giving it a shake when no one was looking. Long before smartphones and online quizzes told people who they were meant to be, the Magic 8 Ball had already figured it out. It was not about the answer. It was about the fun of asking. There was something almost peaceful about opening a box filled with Lincoln Logs and Tinker toys on Christmas morning. The smell of real wood, the smooth touch of each carefully crafted piece, it was creativity in its purest form. Before screens and instant entertainment, these sets were how imagination took shape. You could build cabins, towers, bridges, or entire towns if you had the patience. Lincoln Logs gave structure while Tinker toys added flair. Together, they were an engineer's dream in miniature. Kids could spend hours designing, building, and rebuilding without ever getting bored. There was a rhythm to it, a quiet satisfaction in watching something rise from nothing but sticks and circles. It encouraged focus, patience, and problem-solving, but it never felt like work. Parents loved it because it was wholesome. Kids loved it because it was endless. No batteries, no beeps, just the sound of wood pieces clicking together and a child's imagination expanding. These toys made kids into creators, showing them how to plan, experiment, and think in 3 dimensions. In the glow of Christmas lights, families often built together, turning playtime into teamwork. There was no rush, no flashing lights, no noise, just creativity shared across generations. Decades later, those little wooden pieces still feel timeless, a reminder of when play was quieter, deeper, and entirely built by hand. If chaos could be bottled, it would probably look like Mr. Mouth. This wild family game featured a big, green, grinning frog with a spring-loaded mouth that opened and closed in a circle. The goal was simple: fling your colored chips into the mouth before it snapped shut. It sounded easy until you tried it. Chips flew everywhere. The frog spun faster. The family room erupted in laughter, groans, and that glorious blend of competition and comedy that only 1970s games could deliver. It was loud, messy, and absolutely perfect. Mr. Mouth didn't rely on fancy electronics or complicated rules. It was pure, physical fun. You had to time it just right, send that chip flying, and hope it landed where it was supposed to. Siblings competed for glory while parents looked on, half amused and half exasperated. But no one could deny the energy it brought into the room. Every round felt like a tiny celebration of silliness. Mr. Mouth was not just a game, it was an event, one that brought the whole family together in bursts of laughter and chaos. It proved that sometimes the best entertainment came from the simplest things: a spring, a spinner, and a bunch of determined kids trying not to miss. Even now, the sight of that goofy frog triggers a smile, a reminder that joy does not need to make sense. It just needs to make noise. The Poppin' Pals. Jack in the Box was a masterclass in anticipation and delight. Brightly colored boxes sat innocently on the floor, each one hiding a surprise inside. You would twist the handle, hearing that familiar little melody. Pop goes the weasel, creep closer to its final note. Your heart would race, waiting for that moment when the lid finally burst open and a happy character sprang out. The surprise never failed, no matter how many times it happened. Giggles followed squeals, and sometimes a startled jump turned into pure laughter. It was a ritual of joy disguised as a toy. Every child knew it was coming, but the timing, always slightly unpredictable, made it thrilling. The magic of Poppin' Pals was not just the surprise, but the reaction it sparked. It was a lesson in suspense, excitement, and trust. The bright designs, soft pop-up figures, and easy-to-turn handles made it one of the most beloved early toys of the decade. Parents loved it because it taught cause and effect. Kids loved it because it was endlessly funny. In a time before digital screens, this was interactive play in its most human form: touch, sound, and reaction. Each pop filled the room with a sense of innocence and happiness, a shared moment that lingered long after the toy was put away. It was proof that sometimes the simplest surprises bring the biggest smiles. It was not just a haircut, it was a statement, a flag of coolness raised high across school hallways and roller rinks. In the 1970s, feathered hair took over like wildfire, cascading down the backs and shoulders of teenagers who wanted to look like they belonged in a magazine. The look was all about movement, soft, layered waves flipped away from the face, floating like wings. It was not stiff. It was not prime. It was wild and controlled at the same time. Farrah Fawcett's poster lived on thousands of bedroom walls, her hair practically glowing like a halo. Boys copied it too, feathering crossed lines, making it one of the first unisex styles to sweep American youth. Getting the look right took time, patience, and enough hairspray to knock out a small bug. You needed a round brush, a blow dryer, and some serious dedication. But once it was done, it felt like you had joined something, a club of effortless beauty and breezy confidence. Teachers hated it. Parents did not get it. But your friends? They noticed. They knew. Feathered hair was not about vanity. It was about identity. You were telling the world you had style, that you were paying attention, that you were here. And when the wind caught it just right, flipping it behind your ears like a scene from a movie, that was your moment. The kind you still remember every time a gust hits your face. When store-bought costumes sold out or money was tight, parents got creative with trash bags. One black garbage bag, a pair of scissors, and some orange tape could turn any kid into a witch, ghost, or superhero. It was quick, cheap, and surprisingly fun to make. The sound of the bag rustling was part of the costume itself. Every step crinkled like thunder. Kids would parade around the living room, proud of their shiny new outfits while parents pretended not to laugh. A little creativity and a roll of duct tape could turn any kitchen into a costume factory. The smell of fresh plastic filled the kitchen as parents cut armholes and kids argued about who got the shiny bag. A little construction paper and a marker could transform a recycling bin into a costume workshop. Sure, it crinkled when you moved, and the static cling was unbearable, but no one cared. The pride of making your own costume was part of the fun. Plus, if it rained, you were already waterproof. Homemade trash bag costumes were the ultimate symbol of 1980s ingenuity. Messy, last minute, and completely unforgettable. There are hairstyles, and then there are structural engineering projects. Gravity-defying bangs, held aloft by industrial-strength hairspray, were the crown jewels of 1980s style. We are talking sky-high, shellacked to perfection, immovable bangs that could survive a hurricane. You did not just style your hair, you sculpted it. And the glue that held it all together? A can of Aquanet, the unofficial perfume of the decade. One spritz was never enough. You held that button down until the room filled with fog and your lungs begged for mercy. It was how you knew your bangs were officially done. They had to crunch when you tapped them. These bangs had volume, attitude, and possibly their own zip code. They required teasing, patience, and a total disregard for the ozone layer. Parents disapproved. Schools banned combs in lockers. But if your bangs did not touch the ceiling of your school photo backdrop, were you even living? It was extreme, it was ridiculous, and it was glorious. But eventually, the sky-high trend lost steam, and pastel blazers tried to take over the fashion throne. Spoiler alert, not everyone could pull off Crockett from Miami Vice. Television Guide was the original streaming schedule, printed, folded, and worshipped. Each week, families flipped through its pages to plan their entire viewing life. What time is your show on? What channel is the big movie airing? Without a television guide, you were lost in the static. It listed every program, from early morning cartoons to late-night reruns. You circled shows in pen. You memorized time slots. You argued with siblings over what to watch and when. Sometimes you even set a timer on the VCR to record your favorites, if you could figure out how. Television Guide came with featured articles, behind-the-scenes trivia, and occasionally a glossy cover that made you feel like you were holding something special. It was not just a magazine, it was a map, a lifeline, and a reminder that missing your show meant waiting until summer reruns or, gasp, never seeing it again. Kids today will never understand the pressure of being ready at exactly 7 o'clock, or the heartbreak of flipping the page and realizing your favorite show was preempted by a holiday parade. The television guide was small, simple, and essential, and in a world before scrolling, it helped us find our way through the glow of the living room screen. Pong was not just a video game, it was the crackling start of a digital age no one saw coming. In a darkened arcade or a wood-paneled basement, a small white square bounced between two rectangles, and it felt like the future had arrived. In the 1970s, Pong introduced children and adults alike to the very idea that machines could play back. It was slow, it was simple, but it was hypnotic. One button, one dial, endless tension. Could you angle it just right? Would you miss by a pixel? It was a battle of nerves and reflexes, disguised as a tennis match. It pulled people in, not with explosions, but with the thrill of control. Friends huddled around the console, taking turns, arguing over high scores. The beeps and boops became as familiar as laughter. Parents were skeptical. They thought it was a toy. But it was more than that. It was a shift. A quiet signal that entertainment was moving from the television to the interactive screen. Pong turned passivity into play. It made you active, involved, part of the story. And though games today are more complex, more realistic, more everything, none of them gave you the feeling Pong did, that this blinking pixel was somehow alive, that you were in the game. And for the first time ever, the screen played back. By the mid-1980s, rumors about poisoned candy and hidden razor blades had parents terrified. That is why local police stations and fire departments began offering safety check events where kids could get their candy x-rayed. It sounds extreme now, but back then it was comforting to see uniformed officers dumping your plastic pumpkin onto a metal table. The whirring of the machine and the click of buttons made the whole process feel official, almost like a spy mission. Kids would wait anxiously for their candy to come out clean, cheering when their stash passed the test. Sometimes an officer would sneak a piece of candy and wink, reminding everyone that Halloween was supposed to be fun, not frightening. You would watch the candy pass through the machine like treasure through airport security, and once it was cleared, it somehow tasted better. The event turned fear into community. Flashing lights, parents chatting, kids showing off costumes under the station's bright fluorescence. No one ever actually found anything dangerous, but that was not the point. It was about reassurance, about the idea that everyone was looking out for each other. The poisoned candy panic may have been overblown, but it created one of the most unique traditions of 1980s Halloween, one that mixed caution with comfort. Milk delivery boxes were part of the morning routine before grocery stores became the center of every neighborhood. In the 1960s, many American homes had a small metal box sitting just outside the front door or tucked near the back steps. Inside, the milkman would leave fresh glass bottles filled with whole milk, sometimes with cream floating at the top. It was a system built on trust and timing. Families left their empty bottles out at night, and by morning, new ones would appear, cold and ready for breakfast. The box was often insulated to keep the milk cool, and in the winter, the tops might freeze and push the cardboard caps up like little crowns. Kids raced to bring it in before it could spoil in the sun. Some deliveries even included extras: eggs, butter, cottage cheese, depending on the service. The clink of bottles in the early morning was a familiar sound, and the sight of the milkman pulling up in a white truck or on a three-wheeled cart was part of the rhythm of daily life. It was personal, reliable, and felt like a small luxury. Today, the boxes are mostly gone, rusting behind old homes or used as planters, but to those who remember, they represent a time when things felt simpler, more local, and a little more dependable, one delivery at a time. Soul Train was not just a show, it was a revolution in sequins, sunglasses, and rhythm. It came on like a pulse, strong, steady, and impossible to ignore. When the first beats dropped and the Soul Train line formed, you did not just watch, you felt it. Hosted by the iconic Don Cornelius, Soul Train brought black music, dance, and style into the living rooms of every American household. It was bold, it was loud, and it was beautiful. For many kids and teens in the 1970s, it was the first time they saw joy that looked like them reflected on screen. Funk, soul, disco, all of it found a home on that stage, and in turn, in hearts across the country. The dancers moved like they had electricity in their bones, and you wanted to move like that too. You tried, in your living room, hoping no one saw, or maybe hoping everyone did. Soul Train was culture. It gave birth to trends. It dared you to dress with flair, to walk with rhythm, to be unapologetically cool. The show said, "This is who we are," and it said it with pride and funk and freedom. Even if you could not dance, even if you did not understand the lyrics, you understood the feeling. It made you want to live louder. Today, you can find clips online, but you cannot replicate the feeling of watching it live when the whole country held its breath and got down together. In the 1980s, no Halloween decoration was complete without those delicate paper honeycomb pumpkins. They came folded flat in plastic sleeves, waiting for the moment you would pull them open and fasten the tiny paperclip to hold their round shape. Suddenly, you had a full 3D pumpkin, or a black cat with a bow tie, ready to sit proudly on the kitchen table. The tissue paper was so thin it tore if you looked at it too hard, yet every family had at least one that somehow survived, year after year. The smell of dusty cardboard and old paper was unmistakable when you pulled it from the decorations box each October. These honeycomb crafts gave homes that cozy, low-budget charm that only 1980s Halloween could perfect. They hung from ceiling fans, school windows, and office bulletin boards, glowing orange under fluorescent lights. No one cared that they were fragile or cheap. They were part of the ritual. That simple act of unfolding paper and watching a flat shape become something magical felt like the true start of the season. They were the humble heart of Halloween decorating, bright, delicate, and unforgettable. If the lights went out in the 1980s, chances are something in your room lit up. Glow-in-the-dark stickers were slapped on every surface known to humankind. Bedroom ceilings became constellations. Alarm clocks glowed like miniature UFOs. Light switch covers, shoelaces, trapper keepers, even toothbrushes. Nothing was safe from the radioactive green charm of phosphorescent novelty. And as a kid, it was magic. You charged them up under a lamp, turned off the lights, and suddenly your room was a planetarium. Sort of. The glow would last about 30 seconds. And then, nothing. But those 30 seconds? Pure wonder. The problem came when the adhesive gave out and the stickers peeled off, leaving weird, dusty outlines on your walls. Or when the glow effect faded completely, leaving behind little blobs of dead plastic. Still, the trend exploded. Kids wanted to glow. Toys were made with it. T-shirts were printed with it. Some even tried to make glow-in-the-dark nail polish. The 80s loved the idea of visibility, especially in the dark. But while glowing stars were subtle, the next trend was anything but. Let us talk about the fashion moment that made teenagers look like they were headed straight for the football field. Shoulder pads, anyone? Tangy Taffy was the candy you had to work for, and that was half the fun. Long before it became part of the Laffy Taffy brand, this chewy strip came in a thin plastic wrapper and offered a sweet, stretchy challenge for any sugar-loving kid in the 1960s. It came in vibrant colors and punchy flavors like grape, strawberry, and sour apple, each one delivering a jolt of sugar and just the right amount of tartness. You could bend it, stretch it, or roll it into a ball before finally taking a bite. The longer you chewed, the stronger the flavor got, which made it perfect for kids trying to make a nickel's worth of candy last the whole afternoon. Sometimes it stuck to your teeth. Sometimes it stuck to the wrapper. But it was always worth it. Tangy Taffy was less about elegance and more about fun, bright, bold, and unapologetically sweet. For many kids, it was the ultimate playground treat, swapped on school buses or bought from corner stores with pocket change. Today's candies may be smoother or flashier, but they cannot match the simple satisfaction of a taffy you could stretch, fold, and chew until your jaw hurt. Mall food court hangouts were not about the food, they were about freedom. Teenagers in the 1980s treated the mall like their second home, wandering its air-conditioned halls with nothing but pocket change and big plans to do absolutely nothing. The food court was the epicenter. Tables filled with cliques, couples, and groups of giggling friends stretched out time between slices of greasy pizza and soft pretzels. One soda could last hours, especially when refills were free. You scoped out crushes, eavesdropped on drama, and occasionally made eye contact with someone cool enough to nod back. Parents dropped you off and picked you up hours later, trusting the mall to act like a babysitter with bright lights and security guards. Whether you sat near the arcade or tucked into the corner by Orange Julius, the food court was a social stage. It was loud, it was messy, and it felt like your world. Every weekend brought the same faces, the same greasy trays, and the same comforting rhythm of adolescent independence. No one talked about it like it was special, but for those who grew up there, it was the perfect mix of noise, neon, and growing up in public. It felt like freedom. Pulling into a gravel lot under the open sky, car windows rolled down, static-filled speakers hanging from the window. Drive-in theaters were the closest thing to magic many kids in the 1970s ever experienced. There was something cinematic about the whole ritual, even before the movie started. Blankets in the back seat, popcorn passed from hand to hand, mosquitoes dancing in the glow of the projector. You were watching the big screen, but living a story of your own. First kisses happened there. First heartbreaks, too. For families, it was a cheap night out. For teens, it was a playground of possibility. The movie was important, sure, But it was also background, just one part of the experience. You could laugh out loud, talk during scenes, even sneak in friends in the trunk. And when the weather was just right, with the air warm and still, it felt like the whole world had pressed pause just for you. Double features stretched late into the night, and the drive home felt like floating. Today, we sit in dark theaters with strangers, faces lit by phones, silent and separate. But at the drive-in, the experience was shared across windshields, across families, across communities. It was noisy, it was messy, but it was real. You did not just watch a movie, you became part of one. Before streaming, before on-demand, there was only one way to see It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, when it aired on television once a year. Families marked their calendars, popped popcorn, and gathered in their living rooms in pajamas to watch it together. The flicker of the television cast a soft glow across the room, and even the commercials felt special. It was a comforting constant in a decade that was changing fast. Linus waiting all night in the pumpkin patch while the rest of the Peanuts crew trick-or-treated was both funny and strangely meaningful. It reminded kids that belief itself was part of the holiday spirit. You could almost feel the chill of fall outside the window while the sound of that familiar piano theme filled the room. For many children of the 1980s, The Great Pumpkin was the official start of Halloween. Missing it meant missing the season itself. There was no recording, no replay, no skipping ahead. You watched it live, or you waited another year. That anticipation made it magical in a way nothing today can match. Teen Halloween dances in the 1980s were something out of a movie, literally. The gym was covered in orange and black streamers, paper bats hung from basketball hoops, and a fog machine turned the floor into a dreamlike swamp. The DJ played Thriller at least 5 times a night, and no one ever got tired of it. Couples slow danced under plastic skeletons, while teachers in vampire capes pretended not to notice kids sneaking soda from spiked punch bowls. Costume contests were the highlight, and the competition was fierce. You could not just show up in a mask, you needed lights, fake blood, and commitment. Even the shy kids got swept up in the excitement. There was something magical about the combination of cheap decorations, loud music, and the thrill of being seen in costume outside of class. It was goofy, awkward, and unforgettable, a night where everyone got to be a little wild behind the safety of makeup and masks. Those themed school dances made Halloween feel grown up, yet innocent all at once. The Brady Bunch was not just a sitcom. It was a mirror held up to a hopeful America, one that wanted to believe that everything broken could be blended. A widow with 3 sons, a widower with 3 daughters. Together, they made a perfect mess of a family. For children of the 1970s, this show was more than after-school television. It was comfort. It was order. It was the dream of getting along even when everything changed. You saw yourself in Jan's jealousy, Greg's swagger, or Cindy's innocence. The shag carpet, the avocado kitchen, the tic-tac-toe lawn, it was all so vivid, it practically lived in your memory. It made divorce and remarriage look easy, even fun. It was not about realism, it was about possibility. The show taught you how to talk through feelings, even if the solutions were wrapped up neatly in 25 minutes. It taught you that families were not defined by blood, but by how hard you were willing to try. You sang along with the theme song like it was scripture. You knew that no matter the problem, school, dating, hair, there was always a resolution. It made growing up feel a little less scary, and when you look back now, maybe it was too perfect. But in a world that often felt messy, the Brady house gave you a place to believe that everything, somehow, could work out. Skiing was never the same once neon showed up. I am talking full spectrum, retina-searing neon, electric pink, screaming lime green, safety cone orange, sometimes all at once. You were not skiing. You were glowing. The 1980s fashion scene decided subtlety was canceled, and nowhere was that more obvious than on the slopes. It was like someone dared the ski community to look like walking glow sticks, and they all said, "Challenge accepted." Ski suits looked like outer space met a Lisa Frank notebook. But here is the thing. When the snow settled, all that color had nowhere to go. Once the decade ended, people looked at their slope selfies and realized they had been dressing like traffic signs. Neon was everywhere for a hot minute. Even the zippers had attitude. And if you were not blinded by your jacket, then someone else's was probably reflecting directly into your eyes. That was not just fashion, it was a safety hazard. But at least you had room to move, right? Speaking of movement, the next 1980s trend thought bouncing was the future of fitness and fun, and totally not sprained ankles. Slap bracelets were the toy that hit your wrist and hit peak popularity almost overnight. They were simple. A metal strip wrapped in colorful fabric that snapped around your arm with one satisfying motion. One moment it was straight, the next it curled tight, clinging to your wrist like a coiled snake. Every kid had one. Some had dozens, trading them like currency during recess. They came in neon colors, animal prints, sparkles, and cartoon characters. The louder the snap, the better. Some kids got so good they could slap them onto their arms without looking. But with popularity came problems. Schools started banning them. Parents worried about the metal underneath. Rumors flew about kids cutting themselves open with a rogue bracelet that had been peeled apart. That only made them cooler. Everyone wanted the forbidden accessory. Teachers tried to confiscate them, but they always found their way back into backpacks and onto arms. Slap bracelets were fun, fast, and a little dangerous, just enough to feel rebellious. They were not just toys. They were fashion statements, fidget tools, and tiny thrills rolled into one. And even now, the sound of that sharp snap is enough to take you right back to 4th grade. Click, whir, wait. Watching a Polaroid photo develop was a magic trick you never got tired of seeing. You snapped the picture, pulled it out, and shook it like it could grow faster. In the 1970s, instant photography was a revolution. Suddenly, memories were not something you sent away for. They were something you held in your hands within seconds. No dark rooms, no labs, just light, film, and time. You captured birthdays, school dances, pets, and holidays. You documented the ordinary because the ordinary suddenly felt special when it appeared right before your eyes. The square white border became iconic. You wrote names on the bottom, drew hearts, wrote best friends forever in thick blue ink. The imperfections were part of the charm. A little blur, a smudge, red eyes. It all made the moment feel more real. Parents loved them. Teens adored them. Kids begged to push the button. Polaroids lived on fridges, in wallets, on bedroom walls. They were proof that you had been there, that you had smiled, that you had mattered. In today's world of endless photos, filters, and retakes, a single, imperfect Polaroid holds more weight than 1,000 digital snaps. Because it was honest. Because it was instant. Because you only got one shot. Pumpkin carving kits in the 1980s promised to make carving safe and easy for everyone. They came in cheerful orange boxes with plastic scoops, tiny saws, and pattern sheets showing ghosts, cats, or goofy grins. Parents loved them because they looked safer than kitchen knives, even though those plastic tools could barely cut butter. Every kid remembers that feeling of scraping out slimy pumpkin guts with the dull little scoop while the smell of raw pumpkin filled the kitchen. The flimsy saw would bend halfway through the first eye, but we pushed through anyway, determined to make something spooky. Carving was a family event. Newspapers spread across the table, candles waiting nearby, and someone always yelling about saving the seeds to roast later. Even the failed attempts were fun. You could tell which pumpkins belonged to kids because the mouths were jagged and the teeth were enormous. But when you dropped that candle inside and turned off the lights, it all came together. Those glowing, uneven jack-o'-lanterns sitting on porches were proof that Halloween had truly arrived. They were not just about food storage. Tupperware parties were secret engines of community, commerce, and independence, especially for women in the 1970s. Step into a neighbor's home and you would see it. The pastel plastics lined up like soldiers, the promise of freshness sealed with a pop. But underneath the lids and labels was something deeper. These gatherings gave stay-at-home mothers a way to feel powerful. Selling meant earnings. Hosting meant purpose. Every product pitch was also a performance, a chance to shine in a world that often ignored domestic labor. Laughter echoed through kitchens. Stories were swapped between sales, and orders were written down with practiced excitement. Kids would peek around corners wondering why grown-ups were having so much fun over containers. It felt like a club, part practical, part glamorous. The catalog was a symbol of what your kitchen could be, how your life could be more organized, cleaner, even happier. For women who were told their value came from homemaking, these parties offered a small rebellion. You could make money. You could lead. You could do it all without leaving the house. And when the guests left with their bags of burping bowls and butter trays, it felt like more than shopping. It felt like success. These parties faded with time, replaced by online orders and supermarket shelves. But for one glittering decade, plastic containers were the foundation of something much bigger than leftovers. If these classic toys just brought back the sound of laughter, wrapping paper, and pure 1970s wonder, tell us which one you wished was under your tree, tap that like button to keep the memories glowing, and subscribe so we can unwrap the past together all over again.